The red line screamed to a halt at Porter Square, and that's when Marcus first saw the thing that shouldn't exist. It stood on the platform in a perfect business suit, briefcase in hand, looking like any other commuter waiting for the 11:47 p.m. train. Except its face was upside down. Not turned around, literally inverted, with the mouth where the forehead should be grinning with teeth that seemed to go on forever into the skull cavity where its eyes should have been. Marcus blinked hard, certain his exhaustion from pulling another 16-hour shift at the biotech lab was playing tricks on him. When he opened his eyes, the thing was gone. Just another tired businessman in its place, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. But Marcus knew what he'd seen. The wrongness of it made his skin crawl, made every nerve ending in his body scream that something fundamental had just violated the natural order. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice, then settled back into their steady hum. The other passengers continued their late-night routines, reading, sleeping, staring at their devices, completely oblivious to the horror that had just stood among them. The train lurched forward with its familiar mechanical groan, carrying Marcus deeper into the tunnel system beneath Boston. He tried to focus on his reflection in the dark window, tried to convince himself that stress and sleep deprivation had finally caught up with him. But deep down in that primal part of his brain that evolution had fine-tuned to recognize danger, he knew better. Something was hunting on the red line tonight. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we dive deep into the most terrifying true stories that'll make you question everything you think you know about reality. Before we get started, I've got to ask, where are you watching this from? Are you alone? Maybe turn on some lights for this one. And if you're brave enough to make it through the whole story, smash that like button and subscribe for more nightmare fuel. Trust me, you're going to need something to hold on to for this ride. Because what happened to Marcus Chen that night wasn't just a hallucination. It wasn't stress. It wasn't sleep deprivation. It was something far worse. Something that's still riding the rails beneath Boston, waiting for the next person who sees too much. Marcus Chen had always been a creature of routine. For the past 3 years, ever since landing his research position at Genzyme, his life had followed the same predictable pattern. Wake up at 6 a.m. in his cramped studio apartment in Somerville, grab coffee from the same cart outside Davis Square Station, take the red line inbound to Kendall, MIT, then lose himself in the sterile world of genetic sequencing until well past sunset. It was a good life, if lonely. At 28, Marcus had traded social connections for career advancement, friends for research papers, relationships for the steady comfort of scientific methodology. His colleagues respected his work ethic even if they found him distant. His parents back in California worried about his isolation, but they were proud of his success. Everything in Marcus's world made sense, followed logical patterns, could be explained through careful observation and analysis. The red line had become his second home. He knew every station, every announcement, every quirk of the aging transit system. He'd memorized the timing between stops, learned which car was least crowded during rush hour, identified the best spots to stand for a quick exit. The subway was predictable, reliable, a constant in his carefully ordered existence. Boston's underground felt different at night, though. The same tunnels that bustled with life during the day transformed after 10 p.m. into something more mysterious. The platforms grew empty except for shift workers heading home, college students returning from late-night adventures, and the occasional homeless person seeking shelter from New England's brutal weather. The fluorescent lighting seemed harsher, somehow creating deeper shadows and strange reflections that played tricks on tired eyes. Marcus had noticed small oddities over the past few months, little things that didn't quite fit the pattern. A businessman who seemed to be on the same train every night but never got off at any station. A woman in a red coat who appeared at different stops along the line, always reading the same newspaper from what looked like decades ago. Maintenance workers who moved through cars without making any noise, their tools seeming to float rather than clank against metal railings. He dismissed these observations as the natural result of fatigue and routine. When you rode the same route at the same time every day, your brain started filling in gaps, creating patterns where none existed. It was basic psychology. The human mind's tendency to impose order on chaos, to find meaning in coincidence. The biotech lab where Marcus worked sat in the heart of Kendall Square, surrounded by other research facilities and pharmaceutical companies. The building itself was unremarkable. Glass and steel reaching 12 stories into the Cambridge sky, filled with the kind of cutting-edge equipment that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. Marcus spent his days manipulating genetic code, watching cellular structures divide and multiply under powerful microscopes, searching for the fundamental building blocks of human disease. His work required absolute precision, methodical thinking, and an unwavering trust in empirical evidence. If something couldn't be measured, tested, and reproduced, it didn't exist. This worldview had served him well throughout graduate school and into his professional career. It made him an excellent researcher, a valued employee, a rational human being living in a rational universe. But rationality, Marcus would soon discover, was a luxury that the red line didn't always provide. The seeds of change had been planted weeks earlier, though he hadn't recognized them at the time. Small inconsistencies in his routine. Unfamiliar faces that somehow felt familiar. The growing sense that something in his ordered world was slowly, deliberately being rearranged. 2. The inciting incident. 1. 200 words. The upside-down face haunted Marcus through 3 more stops. Even though the businessman had returned to normal, if he'd ever been abnormal at all, Marcus couldn't shake the image from his mind. The way the mouth had stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of teeth that disappeared into darkness. The way the eyes had been, absent, replaced by empty sockets that seemed to pull light into them rather than reflect it. By the time the train reached Harvard Square, Marcus had almost convinced himself it was a trick of the lighting. The Red Line's aging electrical system was notorious for creating optical illusions. Shadows that moved, wrong reflections that didn't match their sources, fluorescent bulbs that flickered in patterns that made stationary objects appear to shift and dance. But as passengers shuffled on and off at Harvard, Marcus noticed something else. The businessman, the normal businessman with his face properly oriented, hadn't moved from his position near the doors. In fact, he seemed to be watching Marcus with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Not the casual glances people shared on public transportation, but a focused, predatory stare that felt like being examined under a microscope. Marcus pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages while using the black screen as a mirror. The businessman was still there, still staring, and now his head was tilted at an angle that seemed just slightly too far to be natural. As Marcus watched the man's neck continue to rotate, 5 degrees into 15, until his head was cocked at a 45-degree angle that would have required dislocating several vertebrae. "Next stop, Porter Square," the automated voice announced, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Porter was his stop. He'd been riding this route for 3 years, getting off at Porter every weeknight without fail. But the businessman couldn't possibly know that. Could he? The train began to slow, and Marcus stood up, moving toward the doors with a handful of other passengers preparing to exit. The businessman remained seated, but his impossibly tilted head tracked Marcus's movement with mechanical precision. As the train came to a complete stop and the doors slid open, Marcus stepped onto the platform and immediately turned to look back through the window. The businessman was gone, not just moved to a different seat, completely absent from the car. Marcus could see the entire interior through the scratched plexiglass windows, and there was no one wearing a business suit anywhere inside. The few remaining passengers were a college student with earbuds, an elderly woman knitting, and a maintenance worker in coveralls. No businessman, no briefcase, no impossibly tilted head. The doors closed with their familiar pneumatic hiss, and the train pulled away into the tunnel, leaving Marcus alone on the platform. Porter Square Station at midnight was a desolate place. A few scattered benches, flickering fluorescent lights, and the ever-present smell of brake dust and electrical ozone. The late November air bit through his coat as he climbed the stairs toward street level, but Marcus found himself moving slower than usual, constantly looking over his shoulder. The businessman might have disappeared from the train, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't truly alone. The walk from Porter Square to his apartment building normally took 12 minutes, a route Marcus could navigate blindfolded after 3 years of repetition. Down Massachusetts Avenue, left on Russell Street, past the 24-hour laundromat and the corner market that stayed open until 2 a.m. to serve the nearby college students. But tonight, everything felt different. The streetlights seemed dimmer somehow, creating pools of yellow illumination separated by stretches of darkness that felt deeper than they should. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood, distant traffic, the hum of air conditioning units, the occasional siren in the distance, were muffled as if the air itself had grown thicker. Even his own footsteps sounded wrong, echoing off the buildings in patterns that didn't match his pace. Halfway home, Marcus stopped abruptly. He'd heard something that made his blood freeze, the distinctive mechanical whir of subway train wheels on rails. But that was impossible. Porter Square Station was 6 blocks behind him, and the Red Line ran underground. There was no way he should be able to hear a train from street level at this distance. The sound came again closer this time, and definitely mechanical. Not a car engine or construction equipment, but the specific screech and rumble of a subway train. Marcus turned in a slow circle, trying to identify the source, but the noise seemed to come from everywhere at once, above him, below him, surrounding him, like he was standing inside a massive speaker. Then he saw the light. A pale, sickly glow was emanating from a storm drain across the street, too bright and too blue to be normal street lighting. As Marcus watched frozen in place, the light began to pulse in rhythm with the train sounds. Pulse, screech, pulse, rumble, pulse, screech. Like the heartbeat of something enormous and mechanical lurking beneath the city. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Marcus found himself walking toward the storm drain. The rational part of his mind cataloged possible explanations: maintenance work on the subway system, some kind of electrical malfunction, reflected light from an emergency vehicle. But the rational part of his mind was being steadily overwhelmed by something more primitive, something that recognized danger in ways that couldn't be quantified or explained. He knelt beside the storm drain and peered through the metal grating. The blue light pulsed brighter, and for just a moment Marcus could see what lay beneath the street. It wasn't a sewer tunnel or utility corridor. It was a subway platform, impossibly deep underground, with walls that seemed to stretch up far beyond what the street level should allow. And standing on that platform, looking directly up at him through impossible geography, was the businessman with the upside-down face. This time, Marcus could see more details that his shocked brain had missed on the train. The man's inverted mouth wasn't just grinning. It was speaking, moving in patterns that suggested words, though no sound reached the surface. His briefcase wasn't leather as it had appeared before, but something organic and glistening, pulsing with the same blue light that filled the tunnel. And his business suit, when seen from above, wasn't fabric at all. It was skin. Human skin stitched together from dozens of different sources, creating a patchwork covering that moved and shifted as if it were still alive. The upside-down mouth stopped moving, and the thing tilted its impossible head to look directly at Marcus through the storm drain. For a brief, terrifying moment, they made eye contact, though the creature's eyes were still absent, replaced by empty sockets that seemed to pull at Marcus's vision like gravity wells. Then the blue light went out. The train sound stopped, and Marcus was alone on an empty street, kneeling beside an ordinary storm drain that showed nothing but darkness below. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment's single chair, staring out the window at the street below, watching for any sign of unnatural light or impossible geometry. Every few minutes, he would check his phone, scrolling through news websites and social media, searching for any mention of subway maintenance work or unusual activities on the Red Line. Nothing. The MBTA's official website showed standard late-night service, no scheduled repairs, no reported incidents. By dawn, exhaustion had begun to blur the edges of his memory. The businessman with the upside-down face started to feel like a nightmare, the impossible subway platform beneath the storm drain, like the kind of vivid hallucination that comes from too much stress and too little sleep. Marcus made coffee, showered, and prepared for another day at the lab, convincing himself that a good night's sleep would restore his equilibrium. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The first sign came during his morning commute. As the Red Line pulled into Porter Square, Marcus noticed that the platform was unusually crowded for 7:30 a.m. Dozens of people waited for the inbound train, far more than the station typically saw during rush hour. But something was wrong with their behavior. Instead of the usual chaotic bustle of commuters checking phones and jostling for position, every person on the platform stood perfectly still, all facing the same direction, toward the tunnel entrance where Marcus's train would emerge. As the train slowed to a stop, Marcus could see their faces through the window. Men and women of various ages, all dressed in business attire, all wearing the same expression of vacant patient waiting. But their eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire visible surface, like looking into wells of dark water. The doors opened and the crowd began to board with mechanical precision. No pushing, no hurrying, just a steady flow of bodies moving through the doorways with identical measured steps. They filled the car around Marcus, taking every available seat and standing space, but none of them made the usual sounds of a subway ride. No conversations, no rustle of clothing, no shuffle of feet. Just absolute unnatural silence. Marcus tried to avoid making eye contact, focusing instead on his reflection in the window. But what he saw there made his breath catch in his throat. In the glass, the passengers appeared normal, regular commuters with ordinary faces and everyday clothes. But when he turned to look at them directly, the black eyes and vacant expressions returned. The train pulled away from Porter, heading toward Davis Square, and Marcus began counting stops. Just 5 more stations until Kendall, MIT, until he could escape this suffocating wrongness and lose himself in the familiar rationality of his laboratory. But as they approached Davis Square, the automated announcement system remained silent. No voice declaring the station name, no ding to signal the doors opening. The train simply continued past the platform without slowing. Marcus pulled out his phone to check the time, wondering if he'd somehow gotten on an express train, but the screen showed only static. Not a black screen or a frozen display. Actual static, like an old television tuned to an empty channel. The static pulsed in rhythm with the train's movement, and within the random patterns, Marcus thought he could see shapes forming. Faces, perhaps. Mouths opening and closing as if trying to communicate something urgent. The passengers around him remained motionless, but Marcus became aware of a new sound beneath the train's mechanical rhythm. Whispering. Dozens of voices speaking in unison, too quiet to make out individual words, but loud enough to create a constant susurration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The whispers weren't in English, or any language Marcus recognized, but somehow he understood their meaning. They were calling his name. At Harvard Square, or what should have been Harvard Square, the train finally stopped. But when the doors opened, the platform beyond was wrong. Instead of the familiar red brick and tile work, Marcus saw walls of rough-hewn stone that glistened with moisture. The lighting came not from fluorescent fixtures, but from an organic blue glow that pulsed from within the rock itself, the same color he'd seen emanating from the storm drain the night before. The black-eyed passengers began to exit in their same methodical fashion, filing onto the impossible platform without any apparent concern for the architectural impossibility surrounding them. As each person passed through the doorway, their reflection in the train windows flickered and changed, showing glimpses of decay of bones visible through translucent skin of empty sockets where eyes should be. Marcus remained frozen in his seat as the last passenger departed, leaving him alone in the car. The doors remained open, and from the platform he could hear the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They were definitely calling his name now, dozens of voices in perfect harmony. Marcus! 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 Through the windows he could see movement in the shadows of the stone platform. The passengers had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around something at the platform's center, their backs to the train, their heads tilted at the same impossible angle he'd seen the businessman demonstrate. In the center of their circle stood a familiar figure in a business suit, briefcase in hand. The upside-down man had been waiting for him. The creature raised one hand and beckoned to Marcus with fingers that bent in too many places. Its inverted mouth was moving again, and this time the words reached him clearly, despite the physical impossibility of speech. The red line goes deeper than they tell you, Marcus. Much deeper. We've been expanding the tunnels, creating new stations, new destinations. Places where people like you belong. People who see too much. The whispers from the circle of passengers grew louder, more demanding, and Marcus realized they weren't just calling his name. They were chanting coordinates. Numbers that corresponded to specific locations throughout Boston, addresses where other people lived, worked, traveled the same predictable routes day after day. The red line's daily passengers mapped and cataloged like specimens in a research database. Marcus forced himself to stand to move toward the door, but not to step onto the platform. Instead, he reached for the emergency intercom button near the operator's cab. The button was supposed to connect him to the train control center to summon help in case of emergency. But when he pressed it, the voice that answered wasn't human. "Hello, Marcus," the voice said, speaking through the intercom with the same tone and cadence as the upside-down man on the platform. "We've been monitoring your commute for quite some time. Your routine is so predictable, so perfectly suited to our needs. Every morning at 7:32, Porter to Kendall. Every evening at 11:47, Kendall to Porter. 3 years of data, 3 years of habits, 3 years of preparation." The train lurched forward suddenly, doors closing despite the platform full of waiting passengers. But instead of heading toward Kendall MIT as it should, the train plunged deeper into the tunnel system, following tracks that couldn't possibly exist beneath Cambridge's carefully mapped infrastructure. The windows showed only darkness, now broken occasionally by flashes of that organic blue light. And Marcus could hear new sounds from outside the car. Scraping, digging, the rhythmic pounding of construction equipment that never stopped. "We're building new stations, Marcus," the voice continued through the intercom. "Places where the regular schedule doesn't apply, where time moves differently, where people who ask too many questions can find the answers they're looking for. You wanted to understand what you saw last night. You wanted empirical evidence, reproducible results, scientific explanation." The train began to slow, and ahead Marcus could see lights approaching. Not the fluorescent lighting of a normal subway station, but the same blue glow he'd seen from the storm drain and the impossible platform. As they drew closer, he could make out architectural details that defied physics. Platforms that extended in impossible directions, tunnels that branched and curved in ways that would have collapsed under the weight of the city above, waiting areas filled with passengers who stood with the same unnatural stillness. "Welcome to the Deep Red Line," the voice said as the train came to a complete stop. "Your new permanent commute." The doors opened with their familiar pneumatic hiss, but the platform beyond was anything but familiar. It stretched in all directions, further than Marcus could see, populated by hundreds of motionless figures in business attire, all with the same black eyes, all facing toward the train. And standing at the front of the crowd, briefcase still in hand, was the upside-down man who had been waiting for this moment since Marcus first noticed things that didn't belong in his ordered, rational world. Marcus stepped backward in the train car, pressing himself against the far wall as the army of black-eyed commuters began to board. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The train car that had been his sanctuary for 3 years had become a trap, and the platform full of impossible passengers was flowing toward him like a tide of wrongness. The first one to enter was a woman he recognized. Mrs. Patterson from the morning Porter Square platform, who always sat in the third seat from the door reading romance novels. But her face was all wrong now, features slightly too large for her skull eyes that reflected light like an animal's. And when she smiled at Marcus, her teeth went back much further than any human mouth should allow. "Hello, dear," she said in a voice that sounded like Mrs. Patterson, but harmonized with itself in impossible ways, as if multiple people were speaking from the same throat. "We've missed you at the morning stops. So punctual, so reliable, such good data." More passengers filed in behind her. The college student with earbuds who wasn't a student at all, but something wearing a student's appearance, like an ill-fitting costume. The maintenance worker whose coveralls writhed with movement that suggested no human body beneath them. The elderly woman whose knitting needles clicked in rhythm with Marcus's heartbeat despite her hands remaining completely still. And finally, the upside-down businessman stepped aboard. Up close, Marcus could see the true horror of the thing's construction. What he'd taken for an inverted face was actually a face that had been surgically removed and reattached backwards, the stitching still visible around the edges where flesh met flesh in patterns that spelled out coordinates in some alien mathematics. The briefcase wasn't leather or skin as he'd thought, but a collection of human organs arranged in the shape of a rectangle, pulsing with their own independent life. "You've been asking questions?" The thing said, its backward mouth moving in ways that made Marcus's eyes water to watch. "Observing patterns, making notes. We appreciate that kind of systematic thinking, Marcus. It's exactly what we need for our research." "What are you?" Marcus managed to whisper, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own racing heartbeat. The creature's upside-down head rotated 90 degrees to the left, then 90 degrees to the right, as if testing the range of motion. "We're scientists just like you, but our laboratory is much larger than yours. The entire red line system actually expanded now to include dimensions your surface dweller maps don't account for. We study human behavior, human routine, human predictability, and you, Marcus, have been one of our most valuable test subjects." The other passengers had arranged themselves in a circle around Marcus, just as they had on the impossible platform, but now he could see what they truly were. Not people at all, but collections of human parts stitched together with surgical precision, each one wearing the appearance of a familiar commuter like a mask. Their black eyes weren't eyes at all, but cameras. Biological recording devices that had been documenting his every move for months, maybe years. Every morning at 7:32, the upside-down thing continued opening its briefcase to reveal a writhing mass of brain tissue connected by copper wires to what looked like a primitive computer system. Porter to Kendall. Car number varies, but always the same general position. You stand near the window, check your phone twice, observe your fellow passengers with scientific curiosity. Such beautiful data. The brain tissue pulsed, and images began flickering across its surface like a biological movie screen. Memories that Marcus recognized as his own. His first day riding the Red Line 3 years ago. The morning he'd noticed the businessman who never got off. The evening he'd seen the woman with the decades-old newspaper. Every observation he'd made, every anomaly he'd noticed had been recorded and stored in this organic database. "You see, Marcus," the creature said, "we needed someone with your specific psychological profile. Someone trained to observe, to question, to seek patterns in apparent chaos. Someone who wouldn't simply dismiss what they saw as imagination or stress. We needed a witness who would eventually understand what he was witnessing." Marcus realized with growing horror that everything he'd experienced, every strange sight, every inexplicable moment, every gradual escalation of wrongness, had been carefully orchestrated. They hadn't been hiding from him. They'd been revealing themselves slowly, systematically, ensuring he would see just enough to become completely invested in understanding what he was seeing. "The others never made it this far," the upside-down thing said, gesturing toward the passengers surrounding Marcus. "They dismissed us too easily, explained us away, stopped paying attention. So we had to recycle them. Their parts are very useful for our continued research. But you, Marcus, you kept watching, kept questioning, kept riding the same train every night hoping to see us again. Perfect scientific curiosity." The train lurched into motion again, but now Marcus could see through the windows that they weren't moving through tunnels at all. They were traveling through what looked like the inside of an enormous organism. Walls that breathed, passages that contracted and expanded, floors that pulsed with circulatory systems the size of highways. The Red Line hadn't been expanded. It had been absorbed into something much larger, much more complex. "Welcome to the Deep Red Line's primary research facility," the creature announced as impossible architecture flowed past the windows. "You'll be staying here permanently, of course. We have so much work to do together, so many experiments to conduct. And your routine will remain exactly the same. 7:32 departure, regular observations, detailed data collection. The only difference is that now you'll understand what you're observing." The biological walls outside began to close in around the train, and Marcus realized with crystalline clarity that he was about to become another specimen in whatever grotesque research project the Red Line had become. But he also realized something else, something that might be his only chance of escape. They needed him. They needed his specific ability to observe and question and refuse to accept easy explanations, which meant they needed him alive, conscious, and capable of scientific thinking. That gave him exactly one opportunity to turn their own methodology against them. "Wait," Marcus said, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the terror clawing at his throat. "If this is research, then you need proper scientific protocols. Control groups, variables, reproducible results. What you're showing me isn't empirical data, it's just exhibition." The upside-down creature paused in its monologue, its backward head tilting with mechanical curiosity. The other passengers, the recycled commuters wearing their borrowed flesh, turned their camera eyes toward him with renewed interest. "Go on," the creature said, and Marcus could hear genuine scientific fascination in its impossible voice. "Your methodology is flawed." Marcus continued, his mind racing through every research protocol he'd ever learned. "You've been observing me for years, but you've contaminated the data by revealing yourselves. A true scientific study requires that the subject remain unaware of being observed. The moment you showed me the upside-down face, you introduced observer effect bias into your results." The train had stopped moving, suspended now in what appeared to be a vast chamber lined with organic computing systems that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Through the windows, Marcus could see other subway cars arranged in geometric formations, each one containing motionless figures that might once have been human passengers. Furthermore, Marcus pressed on. "If you're studying human behavioral patterns, you need a control group. How do you know my responses are typical? How do you know that my specific psychological profile produces representative data? Without comparison subjects, your entire research project is fundamentally unsound." The creature's organic briefcase began to pulse more rapidly, the brain tissue inside flickering with increased activity. The other passengers had gone completely still, their camera eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. He was walking a tightrope now, trying to appeal to whatever remained of their scientific reasoning while avoiding saying anything that would make them decide he was no longer useful. "You're proposing an expansion of our current experimental parameters," the upside-down thing said slowly. "Multiple test subjects, standardized observation protocols, proper statistical analysis." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And that means returning me to the surface. You can't study natural human behavior in an artificial environment. I need to maintain my normal routine, my normal commute, my normal life. But now I'll be a knowing participant rather than an unknowing subject. I can provide you with the kind of detailed observational data that only a trained scientist can deliver." The biological walls around the train began to shift and reconfigure, and Marcus could feel the creature considering his proposal. Through the organic computational networks visible outside, he could see information flowing in patterns that resembled neural activity on a massive scale. Whatever the red line had become, it was thinking. "Acceptable," the creature finally said. "But with modifications. You will continue your normal commute, but you will also recruit additional subjects. Other passengers who demonstrate the appropriate observational capacity. Other scientists, researchers, individuals with the psychological profile necessary for our expanded study." The train lurched back into motion, retracing its path through the impossible biological corridors. But Marcus could see that they were heading upward now, back toward what he hoped was the normal tunnel system beneath Boston. The camera-eyed passengers began to disperse, taking seats throughout the car, as if resuming their roles as ordinary commuters. "You have 1 month," the upside-down creature said, its briefcase closing with a wet, organic sound. "Bring us 12 suitable subjects, and we will consider our research partnership successful. Fail to deliver adequate recruits, and we will resume our previous protocols for data collection." As the train emerged from the biological nightmare and back into recognizable subway tunnels, Marcus felt a crushing weight settle on his shoulders. He'd bought himself time, possibly even survival, but at a price he wasn't sure he could live with. The creature was asking him to feed other people to whatever the red line had become. The train pulled into Porter Square at exactly 12:23 a.m., just as it had countless times before. The doors opened with their familiar pneumatic hiss, and Marcus stepped onto the platform that looked completely reassuringly normal. Fluorescent lighting, red brick walls, the faint smell of brake dust and urban decay. No organic architecture, no impossible geometry, no passengers with camera eyes. Marcus climbed the stairs toward street level, his legs shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. The November air hit his face like a blessing, cold and sharp and real. The street lights were exactly where they should be, casting their ordinary yellow pools of illumination. The storm drain he'd investigated the night before was just a storm drain showing nothing but darkness through its metal grating. He walked home slowly, constantly looking over his shoulder, expecting at any moment to see blue light emanating from manholes or hear the impossible sound of subway trains beneath the street. But Somerville remained stubbornly normal. Cars passed with their headlights cutting through the darkness. A police cruiser rolled by on its regular patrol. The 24-hour laundromat hummed with the familiar sounds of washers and dryers. Inside his apartment, Marcus locked the door, checked the windows, and sat down at his laptop. He needed to document everything while it was still fresh in his memory. If he was going to survive the next month, he needed to approach this systematically, scientifically. He opened a new document and began typing subject anomalous entities operating within MBTA Redline system. Date November 15, 2024. Researcher Marcus Chen. Initial contact November 14, 2024, approximately 11:47 p.m. He wrote for 3 hours, documenting every detail he could remember. The upside-down face, the impossible platforms, the biological architecture, the creature's demands for additional subjects. When he finished, he had 17 pages of observations, theories, and preliminary analysis. It read like a scientific paper authored by someone having a complete psychological breakdown. Marcus saved the file and leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. In the cold light of his apartment, surrounded by the familiar detritus of his normal life, the whole experience felt like an elaborate hallucination. Stress-induced psychosis brought on by years of isolation and repetitive routine. The human brain was capable of creating incredibly detailed false experiences when pushed beyond its limits. He was about to close the laptop when he noticed something at the bottom of the document. Text that he hadn't written appearing character by character as he watched excellent documentation, Marcus. Very thorough methodology. We're pleased with your initial report. Regular updates will be required as you begin recruitment procedures. Remember 12 subjects within 30 days. We'll be monitoring your progress. P.S. Check your morning commute tomorrow. We've made some improvements to your regular routine. Marcus slammed the laptop shut, his heart hammering against his ribs. The text had appeared in his own document in his own word processor on his own computer, but he hadn't written it, couldn't have written it, unless... He opened the laptop again, but the document was gone. Not just closed, completely absent from his recent files, from his desktop, from every folder on the hard drive. The 3 hours of work had vanished without a trace, leaving no evidence that he'd ever written anything at all. But in the corner of his screen, he noticed something new, a small icon he'd never seen before, a stylized red line that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. When he clicked on it, a simple message appeared. MBTA Deep Red Line. Employee Access Portal Welcome Dr. Chen current assignment subject recruitment quota 12 subjects deadline. December 15th, 2024 status 0/12 complete. Below the message was a list of names and addresses. His co-workers at the biotech lab. His neighbors in the apartment building. Fellow passengers he'd seen regularly on the Red Line over the past 3 years. People whose routines he knew, whose psychological profiles he could assess, whose scientific curiosity might make them suitable candidates for whatever the Deep Red Line had planned. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time, understanding finally settling over him like a weight. The creature hadn't been lying about needing him. It hadn't been lying about his value as a researcher. But it had been lying about one crucial detail. He wasn't a newly recruited subject being given a choice about cooperation. He'd been working for them all along. The recruitment quota wasn't new. The portals showed assignment dates going back 3 years, exactly as long as he'd been riding the Red Line. 3 years of subtle psychological manipulation, of carefully orchestrated encounters of behavioral conditioning disguised as routine commute. They'd been training him slowly and methodically to become the perfect recruiting agent. And tomorrow morning at exactly 7:32 a.m., he would board the Red Line as always. But this time, he would be hunting. Because the most terrifying truth about monsters isn't that they exist, it's that they're very, very good at making more of themselves.